What are we going to be covering today?
Today we'll be discussing Chapter 11 that deals with television and radio.
Okay.
And it's based on a textbook, Advertising and Promotions, an Integrated Marketing Communications Perspective.
All right. Okay. And so this chapter is, how is it broken up?
It's broken up into three main parts. We have television, measuring audiences of television, and then in radio.
Okay.
And then the opening section of Chapter 11 talks about the impact of online video has on the television industry. Can you discuss other developments that have impacted television and over the past 2 decades and other factors that will likely affect it in the future?
Right. Yeah. It's a lot of changes that have happened in the television industry lately. Probably the biggest one is the online presence. Okay, where how the online has increased. Again, I think it was in the book says 61% in the last few years, and whereas TV has gone down 10%. And so it is a big difference, and the availability of the internet and streaming and all of that is a big part of that. Other aspects that are part of that are the DVR, digital recordings, and the access, and really that impacts the commercials, and we can talk about that a little bit as we get going with that. One of the biggest age groups that's really taking off with the industry with the internet is the female population. That that 35 to the 50s, 54, somewhere right in there is they're increasing, a dramatic increase. And the reason that's so important is they do hold a lot of buying power. A lot of times they're the ones that are making a lot of decisions within the household and the products to buy and food and all of those things. And so that's part of that. And the other aspect of them is the females will share more streaming with other females, and that increases the advertising as well. So there's lots of factors in the past couple decades that that are taking place there. The reach as a positive aspect, and we can talk a lot about these advantages and disadvantages as well. So.
Well, going into that, what are some major advantages of television outside of online, but advertising and the advertising medium of television, and what factors affect the use of major network, major advertisers and local companies? Yeah.
You look at, there's a lot of advantages, and on this graphic that we'll see, creativity and impact is the first one. When you think about television, it's the sight and the sound mixed together. It's more lifelike. You can get moods and emotions, and it also can be a very good demonstration of the product. And so you can see it, can't necessarily feel it, but you can see it, you can maybe hear it, establish some moods around that. And so that's a big part of an advantage to that. The second one is the coverage and the cost effectiveness. Television reaches large numbers of large audience, large number of people. You look at the television reach of it. They say 280 million people within the households, and there's they say about 114 million households that it will reach. And so there's a big part there. And so mass marketing coverage and the cost effectiveness is going to be very low. And cost per thousand is an industry standard. So you're looking at some prime time of $27 per 1,000 people. The cost is really ineffective, or it is effective, inexpensive. And so that's a big part of it. The cost effectiveness is great. You think of someone like the World Cup. We're not talking millions, we're talking billions of reach in the World Cup. 2.6 billion people watch the World Cup, and so it's huge when it comes to cost effectiveness. Creativity and attention. The one thing, or the part of that, on the attention, you're a captive audience. Okay, and you're right there. You're watching your TV show, and when you look at the advantages of the advertising, you're right there. And it's kind of intrusive a little ways, but the big thing about television is you must opt out, and that's part of it. Opting out, you have to go change the channel. You have to get up and go do something to get away from that advertising, and so that's why it can be a good advantage there as well. One of the other ones is the selectivity and flexibility. You can advertise on specific programs. You have the flexibility to to go on certain channels, certain time slots, when your target market when you feel is watching. So those are some of the advantages that are part of that.
And then what are some other major limitations of advertising with television?
There's lots of limitations when it comes to that. The first one, we talked about the price being very efficient, but in reality, for smaller companies, it's the opposite. It costs a lot to produce an ad, both in production, high quality ones. I mean, could run hundreds of $1,000s into a production of an ad, and then buying the amount, say a Super Bowl ad. You're talking millions of dollars for a Super Bowl ad plus the production. All of that adds up, and the small company can't deal with that. And so that's probably the first thing. It's for large companies, they're reaching numbers of people. So yeah, the cost per image is per thousand is very low, but you still need lots of money to be able to reach that. So one of the other limitations is the selectivity. Again, there's certain areas that, spots of the day you can be flexible, but yet maybe not, depending on your buying contract. But it's also regional. If my company, you have something local, a restaurant here locally, putting it on TV that says our market is the Midwest, or it's a large market, it might not necessarily be beneficial to be advertising to people that aren't just going to come use your come to your service or your restaurant. Sure. Or whatever it might be. So that's part of that. Another limitation is a fleeting message. Okay, it's not tangible. You can't touch it. You can't feel it. It's there 30 seconds, maybe 15 seconds. It's there and it's gone. So there's that fleeting aspect to that, which leads into the clutter, which we were talking about, and you saw that clip with all that clutter. So that is a limitation. There's so many different things that are going on, different ads. Clutter was once regulated, and that's you talk about time. Of commercials, it was regulated that you could only have so many minutes of advertising per hour. That went from like 9 minutes and it's to 12 minutes, and it's not even regulated anymore. So yeah, there is lots of clutter. And one of the other ones is the limited viewer attention, and that's the DVR. You fast forward it, or the bathroom. Get up and go to the bathroom. Get mixed in with I'm hungry. I'm gonna go get something to eat, and so that's some different things with the viewer attention.
The book also discussed two different ideas when it comes to limited viewing attention. What is the difference between zipping and zapping? Okay,
yeah. So this is going into that limited attention. So zipping and zapping. Zipping, okay, this is what I mentioned about the DVR. Okay, I'm going to fast forward it through this commercial. I'm going to just zip right past it, and so it's a previously recorded program. You can just kind of get through it. The other one is zapping. Okay, and that's where you change the channel. Okay, I'm gonna get out and to avoid the commercials. And this has really increased too. And the people that zap the most are the young population, and young adults, I should say, and especially in men. And the reason a lot of that's taken off to avoid commercials, zapping is increased, is say ESPN or the news networks, or I'm gonna just go check this score out. I'm gonna go just say what CNN's talking about here, or the Weather Channel. I'm gonna flip to the Weather Channel to see what the weather's gonna be during a commercial. So that's the zapping part of all of that happens on there. Okay, going back to just some of the other limitations. The final limitation is the distrust and negative evaluation that happens. TV has the highest distrust, lack of trust within advertising. A lot of times it can be offensive, it's intrusive, and it happens, and it's too frequent, especially if you do it over and over. And so there becomes a lot of negative aspects that become part of the whole limitation of television.
Now we're going to move over into the buying television time for advertising. A common way advertisers purchase airtime is through television networks such as CBS, NBC. The networks are a series of affiliates such as KYC and Mankato, to whom they supply the programming and services.
Yep.
The network shares the revenue of advertising with the affiliates, and the affiliates are also able to sell commercial time as well during non-network periods of broadcasting. What are the various options available to advertisers for purchasing advertising time on television?
Okay, the first one would be the upfront market. Okay, saying we're gonna buy before the TV season starts. So we're gonna buy an ad on this show, every week or whatever it might be, or maybe it's a daily show. We're gonna buy it, and so the television season starts towards the end of the summer. But so now all of a sudden we're getting into buying all that time ahead of time, maybe in the spring or early summer, and so they know what the inventory is prior to coming. So that's the upfront buying, and sometimes it can be even up to a year in advance for some of that. Another aspect would be the scatter market. Buying it here and there and buying bits and pieces is part of that scatter market. For an example, you mentioned the local KUIC. Just thinking back to the Super Bowl last month, actually about a month from today, there was the national, the big ads, the Pepsi and all the Budweiser, all those big advertisers that were advertising. But then there was also some local ones as well. So they gave them a little bit of time in there to run the regional or the local ads, and so that's part of that. When you look at the local news, you're going to get more of your local advertisers. You look at your television programs that are on American Idol and a lot of these other ones. Those big companies are buying up that time ahead of time. And if there's stuff left over, that's when the local stations have the opportunity. And so most of the time, the regional ones are focused more around their local news hours or local programming. So those are some of the differences between the national and the local.
All right, let's talk a little bit about syndicated programs. What are they, and why are they so important?
Okay, so the syndicated programs are the ones that are running daily or weekly or whatever, and usually it takes a number of years to get a syndicated program up and going in syndicated ad buying, and so say something like, for example, the Wheel of Fortune is a syndicated program. It's not necessarily a show, but that's one of an example, and a lot of times it goes by station on which ones they're going to run. We're going to pick up the syndicated show and run it on our stations in our market, and then there's also the non-syndicated ones where they're the reruns, of shows, sure. And a lot of times those are the half-hour shows, the
How I Met Your Mother, the 2.5 Men on WGN.
Yep. Seinfeld. All those reruns of all of those other ones. So those are the non-syndicated ones that are out there. The syndicated ones, again, more examples. Judge Judy. Some of those that are part of it, and so you're advertising through some of those.
All right, great. The method of buying time are sponsorships, participation, and spot announcements. Can you give me a little insight into these three methods?
Yeah, three different ones. The first one is sponsorship. You don't see that quite as much anymore. I should say there's been kind of a swing back a little bit here recently, but the sponsorship is, for an example, a Hallmark show. Okay, so a Hallmark will help sponsor a program. They're usually the sole sponsor. There might be some other ads, but usually they're the sole sponsor. But they have a lot in stake in that, and they, we're going to cover the production costs of making that show. And so that's a big part of that. So sponsorship is usually one main advertiser. They put all the money into making the show or the program, and so it's very limited commercials, and it's upfront paying before it's even produced. The second one that you mentioned is the participation. Okay, it's where you just I'm going to do a certain number of shows. We're going to buy this many ads and participate in this show, it's no real commitment to say okay before the production. Okay, someone else produces it. Now we're just going to help fund it. Afterwards. Buying that, and And so it's, again, no commitment to that. And then the fast one is the spot advertising. Okay, this is where it really gets into the local. Okay, we're going to come in at this time. We're going to advertise. We want to get our message out. You might not even know when the ad actually is going to run, or we're going to say, okay, we want one to run during the 6-hour news, and the other one runs whenever. And so it's a lot of times it's the fill-ins, and that's the spot advertising, and the prices of those will get lower. So really the 3 different price levels: sponsorship, you're paying a lot of money to produce. Then the next level where it's more of a buying package, and the third one might be more of the fill-in and odd times. So those are some examples of the methods of how people buy the ads.
Cable television is growing rapidly. In 1975, only 13% of TV households had cable. By 2010, cable reached 91% of the nation's 114.9 million households. With the rapid growth, what are some advantages and limitations of cable television?
Yeah, cable television, yes, it continues to grow. Probably the first thing is the number of options that are available, within cable. Number of shows. You can be very selective. So when you're wanting to buy, a specific, time, I want to be on, now OPRAH'S network or the Hallmark Channel or ESPN, and whatever it might be, you can be very selective on what what type of channel you want to be on. So that's part of that, and it's going to continue to grow. A lot of times the costs will be lower because you're away from the major networks, and so because it's such a specific demographic of people that are watching a certain network. Maybe it's a golf channel or whatever it might be. You're not reaching as many people, but so the prices will be lower.
You're hitting your niche market. You're getting the people that you want for your product.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of super stations that are out there. Your WGN or your Turner. There's LTBS. A lot of those are other aspects, but a lot of times they're still overshadowed by the major networks, and so you're not. So that's why a lot of times the price is low when it comes to those. So those are some. You got monthly fees. A lot of times you get locked in, and you have certain things that you're paying for when you do go by cable. So those are some examples of that with cable.
So a major part of advertising is to making sure that your product and ideas are getting out to the audience. So we're going to move into measuring the television audience. Mm-hmm. And an important aspect of television advertising is the measuring of the audience. And advertisers want to know, obviously, who they're all reaching. So the sole source of network television and local audience information is Nielsen's media research. All right, let's take a moment to discuss the debate between television networks and advertisers over the measure of TV viewing audiences. Evaluate the changes that have been made to provide advertisers with better measures of TV viewing audiences as well as of the commercials.
Okay, yeah, the Nielsen ratings. You always hear about the sweeps, and usually it's 4 times a year, and they go through a measuring process. And so there's a debate out there between do they really pump up their certain programming for those 4 weeks? Do they do special programs? Do they, make a concerted effort to make, everything good during those times? That's probably one of the negative things. And the advertisers say, well, now it's inflated because you did a special or you did something during that time. And so there's that aspect. And in the past, it's been paper viewing or paper recording. Okay, you got to write down what you did, and so as a person, do you really write down what you really, and then going back what you really watched and the time, and were you flipping or all of these things? Sure. And so that's one of the aspects that the advertiser is saying, well, we don't think that they really are reporting it correctly. A couple other aspects within that, the electronic versus paper. So now there's a lot of electronic aspects they can give you a box and they'll record exactly what's on TV for you. And I think as it continues to grow, there'll be more chips in the TVs and stuff that will just automatically monitor that, and it'll be a lot easier to get actual numbers.
Sure.
So those are a couple of the aspects. One of the other ones is that has been added in there has been the away from home type. Okay, so you go out to a bar. Okay, are you watching a game, or are you watching something on the bar? Are you at a hotel, or are you on your exercise bike in the morning and there's one station that's on, with the local news in the morning, or is it ESPN, whatever it might be. Now all of a sudden there's all kinds of numbers of other people. It could be 10, 20 or more people watching, glimpses of the show or glimpses of what's going on wherever they're at, that, away from home. So that's another part that's been brought into it as well. So those are some things to keep in mind as for the debate that goes on between the two.
All right. There's actually been some recent controversy with this television rating monitoring. Oprah recently came under fire for her tweet during the Grammys in 2012. Her tweet read, "Everyone who can please turn into OWN, her television network, especially if you have a Nelson box." What made this tweet so controversial, and why was it so significant?
It was one that, just flat out blatant saying, turn to my station because we want to pump up our ratings. And a lot of times people are more not quite as forward about that. So now all of a sudden here someone's forward about, out front and saying, yeah, we want the best ratings. So is it persuading people to come or not? What are the, instead of just running your own and not promoting that, we need high viewership during the sweeps here to get our numbers up. So there's that controversy behind that. Should she really have done that to say, okay, it's a promotional to make herself look better?
Sure. What is a commercial rating, and how does it measure different from program rating?
Commercial rating, and that goes back into the zipping and the zapping a lot. When you think about, I'm going to sit down and watch a show, so that's what's been reported, the Nielsen ratings. Okay, so you're assuming you're watching those commercials. Well, the zipping and zapping, people are fast forwarding, they're getting up, they're moving. Are they actually watching the commercials? And so now they've got to get into, okay, we're going to evaluate the measurement of people actually sitting there watching the commercials.
Which would make it more beneficial for the advertisers to rate the commercials over the
right. Yep. So then
program.
they can say, okay, you're not reaching 1 million people with our ad, only 500,000, and so so now we shouldn't be paying that much. And so that's why, from the consumer standpoint, they want the costs lower.
Sure. Now we're going to switch over into radio, which is pretty similar to television in their limitations and with their audience measurements. But the average American listens to radio nearly 3 hours every weekday and 5 hours every weekend. Can you please discuss some of the advantages of radio?
Yeah, radio can be very cost effective. It's again one of those things where the costs can, to reach a number of people are relatively low. It's efficient. You can go on specific stations. You can go to a KFAN, or you can go to a country station. You can get into some of that, but because there's so many different stations, the costs are lower, and they're not competing as well. And you can change things fast as we get into. Okay, I really need to redo my ad. It can be done real quick. It can be done over the phone. The broadcaster can re-say it, whatever it might be. So it can be done pretty fast versus like a television ad where there's a whole production. Sure. It can be changed. So cost and efficiency is the first one of the advantages. Reciprocity. This is where people get emotionally connected to their advertisers because of the station that they listen to. Okay, this is my favorite station, so the people that are advertising, I have a connection with them because there's just this kind of buy-in between each other. They're supporting this station. I like this station. I hear that. I fall into that too. I have certain stations that I listen to, KTUE. I think they're more reputable advertisers. I just all along the lines, those are the ones I'm probably going to purchase from because there's a connection there. And so those are some, the emotional connection is part of it. I mentioned earlier the number of different stations. Again, this is the third one, the selectivity. Again, the demographics. Who's listening to the country station? Who's listening to public radio? Who's listening to, easy listening or the oldies, whatever sports, news talk. So you can get in and advertise with that specific selective group. And I also mentioned the flexibility earlier, easily to change the message. That's part of it. This can be a positive and a negative, but we'll talk about it as an advantage because we're in that segment right now. But the mental imagery, you create your own image of what you think that product is, and it's picture in your mind. It can be powerful. And radio also goes well with the final advantage, and that's how do you integrate it with other aspects. You'll hear a lot of, okay, check us out on the web at www.whatever. You'll hear that in a radio commercial, or look for us in today's newspaper, or whatever it might be. You can change it fast so you can mix it in with other aspects.
Yeah, there'll be times when you'll be listening to the radio and you'll hear an advertisement that you saw on TV. And just playing the audio over, you get that mental imagery of what you had watched on TV in the past.
Yep. That's a very, very good point. We'll talk about that.
All right. So now moving forward, let's discuss some of the limitations of advertising on radio.
Yep. So some of the limitations, a lot of times, are exactly opposite of the advantages. The creative limitations. Again, here you only have the sound. Okay, there's no visual. Okay, remember before you're making mental image, but now it's sometimes you want them to get that. It's a fleeting image as well. It's a fleeting message. It's verbal. It's just there. It's gone. Okay, there's no lasting impact. Nothing. No leave behinds there. It's fragmented. Again, number of stations. It can be all over the board with the fragmentation. Chaotic buying procedures. Radio can be hard, to buy. Where TV, it's okay. Here's our time slots. Here, it's TV is very organized. Whereas the procedures in radio, it's a little harder. You don't know the markets as well, the stations. It's not as well defined, and so it's a little chaotic in those procedures. The research data that's out there is not as strong for the radio industry, especially because there's so many smaller stations. Say, for example, a radio station, say a college radio station, or a local station that has a tower in a town. They don't have the money to invest in all the research that goes into who they're reaching. Limited. The next one would be the limited listener attention. A lot of times the radio is on the background. Okay, whether it be you're driving, talking to people in the car, it's on in the background. It could be in the background at a grocery store. You always hear about the elevator music. What's going on in the background. So a lot of times you're doing something. You're fixing something in the garage or whatever. You might be getting busy. It's background music or background noise. So that's part of it. The next one is the competition from digital media. A lot of that has to do with, you might see in new cars, the satellite, the XM radio, all of those. That's a whole nother aspect it's come in within the last decade. As well as your iPods and your MP3 players, and so that people have access to music and to shows electronically, and not necessarily directly through a radio station. So there's lots of competition there as well, and a lot of times it's advertiser free, so people want to listen to that, so they not listening to other aspects. And then the last one we talk a lot about, even in the television, is clutter. And there's lots of things going on, lots of ads. Radio's fast as well. It's constant changing over, and so there are a number of ads, and so it's hard to decipher through that clutter sometimes.
Audience information is collected from a rating service known as Arbitron. Can you touch base a little bit on how Arbitron works?
Kind of ironic you talk about this. I just probably last month or a little over a month ago, our family had to go through the Arbitron ratings. Cool. And it was one of the things that they send it to you in the mail. Actually, they sent us, I think it was one for the husband, wife, and then if there was kids or something. So they'd actually send you money. And so here's like $3, you know, 3 crisp $1 bills would you participate in it? And then they'd send it again. Okay, as a reminder, we want you to continue to fill this out. Are you sure you want to do it? So I can't remember exactly how much money it was. It was probably like $9 or something that we ended up getting. But the kids thought it was kind of fun that, you know, we actually got free dollars in the mail for filling it out. But what the process was, they send you a book. They say, okay, for this week, you know, I can't remember the exact minutes, but how many minutes did you listen to this station? Okay, and then, you know, you just kind of went on down the line, and so every day you had to fill out what stations you listened to. Did you flip the stations? So it is a process of, again, pen and paper and working through it, and so then we had to send that back in, and then that's how they got their data out of that, and so what stations that we did listen to.
All right, well, I think that we covered pretty much everything from Chapter 11, so we got a little bit of insight into television radio as a medium for advertising, and we just want to thank everyone for taking the time to watch this video and learning a little bit more.
Yep. Thank you, Matt, for putting this together.
Thank you, Mr. Boyer.
All right.